What's up guys, Captain Calisthenics back for another video. Very excited today. It's my first time I'm actually shooting a video where I have a semi-decent setup. Got the microphone set up here, the pop stand, I have some decent lighting, I have a stand for the camera over there. So yeah, we're moving up in the YouTube world, guys. It's definitely a big improvement from my first video.
Hey guys, welcome to the channel.
But anyways, let's get on to the content. Many of you have seen at least one of my videos on building muscle with calisthenics. They're all shown on screen right here. Have a pretty popular legs one, an arms one, an updated arms one, and a more conceptual video where I share the principles you need to follow when you're training. Now here's the kicker. I really don't follow or advise any of those methods anymore. Let's jump right in. So in both my old legs and my old arms videos, I recommended training every single one of those muscles every single day. Very unorthodox approach, and it's definitely one that caught me a lot of flack and questioning in the comments. Now, while you can do this if you want, and while people have built muscle with such methods, while I have built muscle with such methods, I don't advise this anymore. But there's a very specific reason why I used to do it and why I used to teach it. So the reason I used to train those groups every single day personally, and why I advised to do such in those videos at the time, is because at the time I was training skills every single day. And so since I was training with low intensity as far as my hypertrophy training went, that way I could not be sore on any given day and I could give my skills training my best effort. Now, what I recommend is once you get a little bit further into skills, I think you should train it less frequently. But something you got to do in your programming is you have to be logical about when you plan your skills training and your hypertrophy training. So for example, I'll have a planche session right before my arms training, then the next day my arms will be sore, I can't train planche and stuff, so I'll maybe do front lever and then legs, and then after that I'll be recovered in my arms and I can do whatever skill. That, you know, you gotta plan that out so that way you're not training skills when you're gonna be having those muscles sore because you just trained them the previous day. After reading a lot of literature on this and studying up on some bodybuilders who followed a very contrarian method of training, it is very clear to me that to provide the best muscle and strength stimulus possible, a muscle needs to be brought to its absolute limits. The thing is, when you're training every single day, this necessarily excludes the possibility of training with high intensity, because if you actually did that, you'd be too sore and weak to train effectively the following day. I now believe in training muscles at a much higher intensity, which means the workouts need to have a few sets to failure, but don't need that much volume. And this implies that you are training a muscle no more than twice per week. And in my own personal program and most of the programs that I have in my Calisthenics course, this is the frequency that is used, is once every 4 days actually, for each muscle. So in those 2 sessions, you are going to be working out with high intensity. You're going to be doing some sets to absolute failure and sending a strong growth stimulus to your body. You're also going to be allowing plenty of days to recover though. Most people, they don't allow enough rest days to fully recover. That's what I currently believe. When you train every day though, you send a weak growth stimulus and you also don't fully recover oftentimes. Let's talk about my hypertrophy video, this video right here. In my hypertrophy video, I recommended doing a lot of sets per muscle, but not taking any of those sets actually to failure, instead taking them about 2-3 reps away from failure. I don't believe in doing this anymore. I think every set should be maximally efficient and maximally effective and actually taken to failure or beyond. So let me go dig into this a little bit deeper as far as what I'm talking about. For example, I just created a whole new set of programs in my Calisthenics Hypertrophy course, which is linked in the description by the way, that for the most part have no more than 3 sets per muscle per workout. Some of these sets are just taken to regular failure. Some of them are rest pause try sets, or rest pause try sets where you go to failure, rest about 15 seconds, go to failure again, rest 15 seconds again, then go to failure one more time. Some of them involve eccentric reps methods, and then some of them involve supersets. It's a very high intensity way. It takes way less time than my old programs, and funny enough, it's probably more effective actually. I just think the high intensity training method is better all the way around. Now, let me get something clear. What is training to failure? Training to failure means you actually train to failure, which can be difficult mentally at first if you're not really used to it. You should not set limits in your head. For example, what I used to do is there'd be one rep, it'd be very hard, I'd barely get past halfway, barely finish the rep, and then instead of actually attempting the next rep, I would say, oh, that was failure, I'm not gonna be able to do the next rep. Training to failure, guys, you don't get that luxury. You need to actually go until you can't complete a rep, until you get halfway or whatever, and then you actually fail. That's what failure means in my book. You can't predict that you're not going to be able to do the next rep and then not even attempt it. Okay, failure means actually going to failure. You have to get this right because the high intensity methods, they're based on, well, high intensity, they're based on providing the maximum difficulty, maximum growth stimulus to a muscle. And if you're shortening your workouts, you're doing less sets, you're supposedly doing these high intensity methods, but you're actually not going as intensely as you should, then you're really shortchanging yourself, and it just defeats the whole premise of the program, which is maximum intensity. If you're not being honest with yourself, you're not going to get the results that you could.
It is the intensity of your workout, rather than its duration, that determines your rate of muscular growth. So your immediate goal should be to reduce the time spent in training and to maximize your effort utilized in training.
So you have to be committed to actually go to total failure when we're dealing with high intensity training. It can take some getting used to at first. It was hard for me mentally, but now it's something that I enjoy, and I just like challenging myself in that way. But yeah, it can definitely be a mental barrier at first. However, think about the two options. You can do sets and sets of junk volume where they're not taking to failure, not efficient sets, and it's going to take you 2 hours, 2.5 hours, or you can go for the actually more effective, more efficient method of high intensity training, which, yeah, there's going to be some sets that are much more difficult than, low intensity sets, but the workouts are so much shorter. I just find it so much more enjoyable, guys. I'm very much enjoying this type of training.
You can train hard or you can train long. You just can't do both.
Let's talk about failure and recovery, because training to failure, it does increase your recovery burden a little bit, which is not a bad thing. As we've already covered, you need more rest days when you're training to failure and when you're training with high intensity. So you should not be training a muscle more than 2 times per week. And as I mentioned already, I currently train each muscle once every 4 days in my own program. Beginners especially need enough rest days. I really can't stress this enough. And they should not be doing as many sets to failure or as high intensity, because they're not as well adapted to recover from that, and it can actually lead them to overtraining and just be counterproductive. I accommodate for all this in the beginner versions of my programs in my course, which once again you can find in the description. There's some studies that actually show or suggest that beginners are better off not training to failure. Some of these were brought up in a Jeff Nippard video I'll show right here, I'll put in the description as well. But I think most of this can be explained by the training frequency being too high. So what am I talking about here? Mike Mentzer, he's one of the guys that popularized the high intensity method for bodybuilding, and he said that beginners, they really need 4 or 5 days of rest if they're training to all-out failure, but these studies don't accommodate for that, which according to Mike Mentzer, he would say, okay, well, they're actually overtrained, so of course they're not going to progress as well as the group that didn't train to failure. So if beginners are training to failure, if they're going that high intensity, guys, you have to allow yourself to rest enough. So my old hypertrophy training philosophy, it was aligned pretty closely with mainstream bodybuilding protocols. The way I came to every aspect of that program is I would look at studies. Like, okay, let's research the studies on what's the best amount of sets per week, best amount of sets per workout, the optimal rest time, optimal reps, and then I put all that together into a program. The thing is, I don't think that's the best way for all the reasons I've covered already. I think the mainstream fitness industry is pretty misguided on some of these things. If you want to go back all the way to the 70s and 80s, Arnold, the bodybuilder, he popularized the really high volume, long workout method. He was under the sphere of Joe Weider at the time, super famous bodybuilding coach and just figure in that sphere. He's the one that really popularized that method in his magazines, and by having his athletes like Arnold and Franco Columbu, by having them use his methods. Such training follows the intuitive reality of bodybuilding as far as what's required, which is this. A muscle needs to be strained to its maximum limits if it's going to grow. And when you have a bunch of low intensity sets, you can replace those with a few high intensity sets, and you're going to have less overall burden on your body, your joints.
The tendency will be a desire to do more. This, however, is neither desirable nor possible.
Now I want to make something clear here. It's not like if you do 10 sets of pull-ups, but each set's a few reps away from failure, that workout and that effort's not completely wasted. You're sending a growth stimulus to your body. However, you're going to be burning yourself out. When I used to do this high volume workouts, I would just burn out and then have to take a deload every few weeks. You're going to be doing that. You're going to be taking forever to do your workouts. I mean, if that's just one part of your workout, your workout's probably taking 2 hours.
Sustained attempts at high-intensity training does little in the way of stimulating further growth. Instead, what results is a reduction of the body's recuperative abilities. All work performed past the point of maximum stimulation will be counterproductive. A routine that is intense enough to stimulate growth must also be short enough to allow growth to take place.
And on top of that, I think what you could replace that with, what would be more effective, is if you did one superset. If you just did one set of pull-ups to absolute failure, let's say one rest pause tricep of pull-ups to absolute failure. So pull-ups 15 seconds, pull-ups 15 seconds, pull-ups, and then those 3 little sets are all to complete failure. And then you did 5-second negative failure after that, so you got on something, so you could jump up to the top position of the bar and then descend yourself as slowly as you can until you can't even do an eccentric rep lasting 5 seconds. If you did that, so a rest pause tricep of pull-ups supersetted with 5-second negative failure pull-ups, that one superset, which would have, be very high intensity, be difficult, I think that would probably give you the same or maybe even better growth stimulus than the 10 sets of low intensity pull-ups. But that's what we're talking about here, guys. Huge advantage. All right, guys, I'm glad you made it to the end of the video. That indicates to me that you found value. If you want to return the favor, go ahead and leave a like on the video and comment something. That way we can boost the channel in the rankings. More people can see it. More people can find this value I'm trying to put out here. My Instagram is the_captain_calisthenics. My DMs are always open for any questions or help. My website is captaincalisthenics.com, linked down below for your convenience. And that's where you're going to find my calisthenics hypertrophy course. The course is still going to be on sale for a few more days. I think in about a week, I'm going to go ahead and raise the price permanently as I'm adding everything else I want to add to it. There's exercises in there I do not see taught anywhere else. I just go so much more in depth than all the other content you're going to find. We cover everything from warm-up to mental game, training, programming. There's tutorials, and then there's the full comprehensive programs at the end that I've mentioned a few times before. Go ahead and check that out if you want to invest in your training. There's the link below. And stay tuned. I have a lot more content coming for you guys. I mean, come on, I just got a legit setup, for goodness sake. That should tell you what I'm trying to do here. I'm trying to move up in the YouTube world. I'm trying to put in a lot more effort into the channel. So stay tuned, and best of luck in your calisthenics journey.